In today's video, I take a trip to Las Vegas. Not to gamble, not for the showgirls, but in search of the kind of food I like. Nachos, cheeseburgers, pizza, and pancakes. Of course, I also visited some famous Vegas attractions, such as the Bellagio fountains, and I saw an incredible show at the Sphere. So come along with me as I escape the winter weather at home and travel to fabulous Las Vegas. The story begins at my local airport in Pasco, Washington, where I checked in for my United Airlines flight down to San Francisco. And from there, I'll get on a larger plane for the flight to Las Vegas. Since this would be an afternoon flight, I decided to have lunch at the really good restaurant they have here at the airport. That is barbecued brisket, and it was fantastic. With the fries and the tax and the tip, it was a $22 airport lunch. Now, unfortunately, I had a lot of sitting around because my plane was coming from Denver, where things were all fouled up by bad weather there. So the plane was very late in getting out of Denver. Now, I made the best of the delay by going back to the restaurant and having a rum and coke while I waited. The plane ended up being about 3 hours late in arriving. Things like this can happen when you try to fly in the winter. So the trip was not off to a very good start, but I can be very patient in these situations. So 3 hours later than expected, I boarded the plane that would take me to San Francisco. And this was after the sun had set. So much for an afternoon flight. But the view was very beautiful with all the city lights as the plane crossed the Columbia River on our way south out of the Tri-Cities of Pasco, Kennewick, and Richland, Washington. I fly quite a lot these days. Last year I went on 5 cruises, so that involved a lot of flying to get back and forth. And while I can be a bit of a cheapskate on some things, I am willing to shell out the big bucks to never fly in coach again. I almost always fly in first class these days, and this week is no exception. But these first class flights back and forth to Las Vegas only cost me $11 and a bunch of frequent flyer miles, thanks to all those flights I did last year to get to and from 5 cruises. Anyway, a couple of hours later, this was the view as the plane landed in San Francisco, and United Airlines felt so bad about the 3-hour delay to the flight that they gave me a $20 food voucher. So I decided to have a light dinner at the San Francisco airport at a restaurant called the San Francisco Giants Clubhouse, an ironic place for me to eat since I am a die-hard Los Angeles Dodgers fan. But the food here was good. I had some of the best clam chowder I've ever had, plus an ice cream sundae for dessert. That came to $28, and United Airlines covered $20 of it. Now, because of the 3-hour delay on the first flight, I wasn't even close to making it in time for my scheduled flight to Las Vegas, and United ended up automatically rebooking me on a much later flight to Vegas. And it ended up getting delayed too. And to make a long story short, by the time I got to the Flamingo Hotel, which would be my home base in Vegas for the next few days, it was 2:30 in the morning. That was one long travel day. But finally, I was in Vegas, and after a good night's sleep, it would be time for all the fun to begin. After getting into the hotel at 2:30 in the morning, I slept in quite late the next day, and by the time I was up and showered and ready for action, it was time for lunch, not breakfast. And this would be one of the highlights of the whole trip for me, lunch at Guy Fieri's restaurant, which is just about a 2-minute walk from the Flamingo Hotel where I was staying. I met up with my friend Jeff, who lives in Las Vegas. And Jeff and I split an order of Guy Fieri's famous trash can nachos. These were absolutely delicious, as I knew they would be because I've had the trash can nachos before at several of the Guy Fieri restaurants that are on board Carnival cruise ships. But the serving size of the trash can nachos at his restaurants on land is more than double the portion size you get at the cruise ship restaurants. And between the two of us, Jeff and I came close, but we did not quite finish the trash can nachos. But this was the best thing I ate in Las Vegas. In fact, the best thing I had eaten in quite a while. And if you're wondering what it cost, the trash can nachos plus soft drinks for me and Jeff, plus tax and a generous tip for our server, came to $52. And that was my treat for Jeff because he and his wife were going to take me out for an even more expensive meal the next day. Now, Jeff was the one that recommended that I stay at the Flamingo Hotel, and that was a fantastic recommendation. I will definitely stay at the Flamingo again the next time I come to Las Vegas. The three things I like most about it: location, location, location. The Flamingo Hotel is located right next to a dining, entertainment, and shopping area known as the Linq Promenade. This is an area that's perfect for tourists like me. There are no vehicles allowed. You just walk up and down the promenade, and it's full of restaurants that are, by Vegas standards at least, lower priced than a lot of the fancy Vegas restaurants. I was talking to a guy the night before who had gone out to dinner at a fancy Vegas steakhouse, and the bill for the dinner for their party of 4, including several rounds of drinks, was $1,700. Well, these restaurants on the Linq Promenade are much more reasonable than that. And besides restaurants, there is a Starbucks, lots of bars, candy stores, including one where I got a nice ice cream cone, and there's even a comedy club. At night, the Linq Promenade becomes even more beautiful. There's kind of a magical vibe to it at night. People come here for dinner, they have a few drinks, everyone's on vacation and feeling good. It actually reminded me a lot of a cruise ship because just like a cruise ship, everything that's here is designed for the pleasure of you, the tourist, giving you everything you'll need in one place that's easily walkable. There's security, making sure everything's safe. They don't allow street artists or hustlers in here. Everybody's just having fun. I totally loved that my hotel, the Flamingo, was located right next to the Linq Promenade, full of great places to eat, drink, and have fun. The Linq Promenade is also where you'll find the High Roller, and it's not a Ferris wheel, at least not the kind you've probably been on before. Inside the fully air-conditioned cars, they actually serve booze. So the High Roller moves very slowly. In fact, at first glance, you'd think it wasn't even moving at all. But if I zoom in here, I think you can see that it is moving, but really slowly. And that's on purpose, to give you time to enjoy some drinks as you take in the views of the Sphere and the rest of Las Vegas. Now, let me give you a tour of the room I stayed in. I was here for 3 nights. Cost me a grand total of $327, and that's including the resort fees and the taxes. Now, it's not always that inexpensive. This was January, the off-season, and I picked this particular week to visit because rates were about as low as they ever go, since there was no big conventions or events in Las Vegas this week. They're in the process of renovating all the rooms in the Flamingo. The room that I was in was one of the rooms that has been renovated. When you book your room, they clearly designate the renovated rooms, so be sure that's what you book if you go to the Flamingo. You don't want one that hasn't been renovated yet. There were electrical outlets and USB ports on both sides of the bed, and also on this cabinet that sits under the TV. Inside the cabinet, there's a refrigerator as well as a safe, and the room had lots of storage space. I liked the curved couch, although I didn't use it as a couch. Since I was alone, I just opened up my suitcases on it and left it that way for my entire stay rather than actually unpacking. Now, there was one thing about my room that was goofy. I don't know if all the Flamingo rooms are this way, but in the bathroom, take a look at the shower. Notice that glass partition between the shower and the bathroom. It only extends part way across the opening. There's no second piece that slides out to block the opening, and there's no shower curtain, although there is what looks like a rod for a shower curtain. So every time I took a shower, there was nothing to stop the water from splashing out onto the bathroom floor. It made a huge mess that I then had to clean up using towels. I turned off the room lights for this shot so the camera can better see the view out my window without reflections. It's a pretty great view. If you look over to the left, you're looking at the Las Vegas Strip. You can see the Mirage Hotel and the mountains in the distance. If you look over to the right, we have a view of the High Roller and the Sphere. Right in front of us is the Linq Hotel, and if we look straight down, 27 stories below us, that's the Linq Promenade. If we stand out on the Linq Promenade right by the entrance to the Flamingo and tilt the camera up, you can see where my room was on the 27th floor of this 28-story hotel. One of the main reasons I wanted to come to Las Vegas was to see and experience the Sphere for myself, and tonight is the night. The funny thing about the Sphere, if you're looking at the outside of it, is that it's best viewed from a bit of a distance. To get this shot, I walked up to the top of a parking garage that's a few blocks away from the Sphere. And from this distance, it looks really great. But when it was time to actually walk over to the Sphere, and I was standing outside in front of it, I was too close. Kind of like standing too close to your television. It was all pixelated because I was just standing too close to it. Inside the Sphere, after you get through a security screening, there are escalators that will take you up one level where they have a lobby area. There are also elevators for anyone that can't do escalators. I really liked the interior design of the lobby. It feels very futuristic, but still classy. As you look at these shots of the lobby area, let me just mention that I was not here for a U2 concert. That's not my kind of music. I bought a ticket to see Postcard from Earth, which is a movie made especially for the huge screen here at the Sphere. Ticket prices depend on where you sit in the theater. My ticket cost me $78. Now, they spent over $2 billion to build this venue, and they have to make it back somehow. So the tickets are expensive, as is the food and drinks that they offer here in the lobby. They have a few gimmicks in the lobby to entertain you before the show. There's a talking robot. It reminded me of something I might have seen at Disney World like 30 years ago. Didn't impress me much. There was also a full body scanner that made some kind of avatar modeled after you. I wasn't impressed by that either. But I was definitely impressed with the show that I saw at the Sphere. To get to my seat, which was in what's known as the 300 section of the arena, there were 2 more sets of escalators, and of course there were elevators available too. Let me give you a very helpful tip for anyone that wants to buy food or drinks at the Sphere. Don't buy them down on the lower level of the lobby. That is the most crowded area where you will have the longest wait time to get what you want. There are places offering food as well as bars where you can get drinks on every level of the Sphere. So go a little higher up, because the higher up you go, the less crowded things will be. Here's the view after I finally got to my seat, and notice that they try to fake you out with that little white screen, making you wonder if that's going to be the size of the movie you'll see. They do that for effect. The movie starts about the size of an IMAX screen, but before long, it expands to fill up your entire field of view. In fact, more than your field of view. You'll find yourself looking from side to side and up and down to see all the details on this very high-resolution screen. When it was all over, I was glad that I had spent the money to be here. It was a very unique experience at the Sphere. If they ever book a band that I like, I could see myself coming back for a concert. For breakfast the next morning, I ate at Maxies Diner, one of the restaurants on the Linq Promenade. It was a chilly 41 degrees that morning, although it would be a sunny 57 degrees later in the day. But I was a little chilly, so for breakfast, I started with a cup of hot chocolate. And then had a Denver omelet and some breakfast potatoes. But I really didn't care for the peppers that they used in the omelet and in the potatoes. The peppers overpowered the taste of everything else. They should have just used a nice mild bell pepper. So that was a disappointment. It cost me $30, including taxes and tip. Lunch that day was hugely better, both the food and the price. There's an In-N-Out burger right there in the Linq Promenade next to my hotel. I am a huge fan of In-N-Out. I like the secret menu item known as the 3x3, which is a cheeseburger with 3 thin little beef patties inside. It's so frustrating where I live in Washington, there isn't an In-N-Out anywhere near me. In fact, this trip to Vegas for me was really mainly about just getting some great food that I can't get at home. Trash can nachos yesterday, and In-N-Out burger today. And it's such a great value, even in Vegas. My 3x3 In-N-Out cheeseburger with fries only cost $11. This whole trip came about because I was sitting at home one day and I couldn't think of somewhere interesting to go for lunch. I knew I had a bunch of frequent flyer miles, so I started thinking about where I could fly to have some delicious food for a few days, and I thought of Vegas. Well, besides all the great restaurants, bars, shops, and entertainment venues that are right here on the promenade next to the Flamingo Hotel, another thing I really liked about the Flamingo was an outdoor area that they call the wildlife habitat. This is a beautifully landscaped area just outside the hotel where they have koi fish in the ponds, and there's waterfalls and plants and trees. It's very beautiful, and it smells good, too. You hear the sound of birds in the background, and it's not piped in. It's real. In fact, they actually have real flamingos. And today I'm wearing my flamingo shirt in honor of the great stay I had there. Anyway, I really liked spending time out in the wildlife habitat at the Flamingo Hotel, even in January. The weather in Vegas is certainly much more mild than up north where I live in Washington State. Another great thing about the Flamingo Hotel, besides the wildlife habitat and being located right next to all the great stuff on the Linq Promenade, is that the Flamingo Hotel is right on the Strip, Las Vegas Boulevard. So it was an easy walk to see many famous Vegas attractions like Caesar's Palace, or the Paris Hotel, which features a Vegas version of the Eiffel Tower, or the Bellagio fountains. These fountains don't run continuously every minute of the day. The first show, at least when I was there, was at 3 p.m., and it was about a 10-minute show. In the afternoons, the shows happen every 30 minutes on the hour and on the half hour. Later in the evening, they step it up and do the shows more frequently than that. I actually got tears in my eyes watching the Bellagio fountains. You know, it's all choreographed to music, which I can't include here in this video since the music is all copyrighted. At the show I saw, the first song they used was Whitney Houston's version of the Star-Spangled Banner. And between that and just seeing the fountains in person, I'm not exaggerating when I say that I had tears in my eyes. It really got me. On the first floor of the Flamingo Hotel, there's a casino. Now, that's not my thing. I didn't come to Vegas to gamble or to drink booze, but to each his own, right? There's also a little food court within the casino at the Flamingo. I had a slice of New York-style pizza there, but with a drink and a garlic roll, it set me back $15, and it wasn't that good. I hope to have much better New York-style pizza this summer when I'm in New York City for a cruise. Also, in the food court here at the Flamingo, there's a Johnny Rockets burger joint. The Flamingo Hotel also has a really nice swimming pool area. Now, I was there in the winter, so it was closed, but I bet in the summer, this is a fantastic place to spend some time. One night for dinner, I took a lift to the south end of town and met up again with my friend Jeff. And this time his wife Michelle joined us too. We ate at a classic Vegas Italian restaurant called the Bootlegger Bistro. And it goes way back to the Rat Pack era, although it was at a different location in those days. Everyone from Liberace to Frank Sinatra and even Elvis has dined at the Bootlegger. Our appetizer, these garlic rolls, were delicious. I also had the minestrone soup, which was also good, although chunkier than the minestrone that I'm used to. And for my entree, I had the lasagna, but I guess I had a senior moment. Somehow I forgot to shoot any video of the lasagna. I thought I did, but I must have forgotten to push the record button. Sorry about that. Well, the next morning, which was my final day in Las Vegas, I decided to give Maxies Diner a second try for breakfast. I really wanted to like Maxies. I thought maybe I just ordered the wrong thing there the first time. So today I ordered the pancakes. And the good news is that they were really fluffy. But first off, they really should warm up their syrup. And more importantly, there just was no wow factor to the taste of the pancakes. Here at home, my wife makes me a really nice breakfast almost every day, but sometimes for a special treat, we go out to breakfast, and we almost always go to IHOP. The pancakes at IHOP just knock my socks off. They're so delicious. The pancakes at Maxies just were not in IHOP's league. $23, including hot chocolate, taxes, and a tip. And that was my second lackluster breakfast at Maxies in 2 days, so I don't think I'll be eating there next time I visit Las Vegas. Sadly, this was my last day in Vegas, so I took a lift over to the airport for the first of 2 flights to get home. Much to my delight, the Las Vegas airport has one of my favorite casual lunch restaurants, Baja Fresh. Sadly, the nearest one to my home here in Washington is a 4-hour drive, so I never get Baja Fresh anymore. When we lived in California, my wife and I would go to Baja Fresh at least once a week. Delicious food at very reasonable prices. Now, here at the Las Vegas airport, the prices were a little higher, but a burrito ultimo made with steak and including a soft drink set me back $21, and I enjoyed it. For dessert, I stopped by Ruby's Diner, not to be confused with Maxies Diner. I had a strawberry shake to go, and it was somewhat high-priced at $10 for a shake, but I enjoyed it. It's kind of a funny sight to see slot machines inside an airport, but that's Las Vegas for you. Thankfully, my flight from Las Vegas to Denver was completely on time, and once again, I would be in first class for both of my flights today. As I mentioned earlier, I paid $11 for these first class flights to and from Las Vegas, plus a bunch of frequent flyer miles. On the way to Denver, it sure was beautiful looking down at the Rocky Mountains from my window seat, and I enjoyed a complimentary rum and Coke. Here's a time-lapse view of our landing in Denver. And there at the Denver airport, they have another one of my favorite casual lunch restaurants, Shake Shack. Now, I had already had lunch today, so I wasn't very hungry. So I just got an order of their very delicious crinkle-cut fries for $5. And these were some of the best French fries I had ever had, period. Notice that I brought a packet of seasoning salt from Red Robin, another good place for French fries. My flight home out of Denver was also completely on schedule, a delightful contrast to the 6 hours of delays I had endured to get to Las Vegas. A lot of snow had fallen at my house while I was gone. Look at this picture I snapped of our hot tub. So that wraps up the story of my January 2024 trip to Las Vegas. I want to hear your reaction. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about the kind of food that I like to eat. The last time I ate a salad was, I believe, 1980. Feel free to tease me about it. I'm Jim Zim. I'm putting up on the screen links to some of my other travel videos. So if you liked this one, click on one of those thumbnails and enjoy another.